The first rays of an alien sunrise bled across the sprawling cityscape of New Aurora, casting long, chromatic shadows over a metropolis that thrived on contradictions. It was 2157, a time when humanity's reach had extended far beyond the blue cradle of Earth, yet the ghosts of its past clung stubbornly to every neon-lit street and crumbling relic. The city pulsed with a heartbeat of its own, a ceaseless rhythm born from the clash of futuristic ambition and remnants of decay. Here, towering skyscrapers of glass and alloy pierced the early morning haze, while in their shadow, forgotten alleys whispered secrets of loss and struggle. Aboard the starship Aurora's Edge, Captain Elise Voss began her day with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The ship's corridors, lined with interactive holographic panels and subtle luminescent strips, hummed quietly, a constant reminder of the technology that both defined and confined their existence. Elise's footsteps echoed softly as she made her way to the command deck, her every movement deliberate and measured. There was a heaviness in her stride that belied the aura of control she carried. Beneath her steely gaze and resolute posture lay a turbulence of personal sorrow and defiant hope. As she entered the command center, the panoramic viewport revealed an expanse of shimmering stars intermingled with the glow of distant nebulae. Outside, the cosmos unfurled in an endless tapestry of wonder and peril, a reminder of both the beauty and the vast dangers that lay in the uncharted void. Elise paused, her eyes lingering on the celestial display as memories of a lost family surged unbidden. The weight of her past, marred by tragedy and sacrifice, had forged a spirit tempered by both loss and an unyielding resolve to protect the remnants of what was left of humanity. In that quiet moment, the hum of machinery and the soft murmurs of her crew around the command station formed a subtle symphony of hope and determination. Her mind flickered to the delicate balance of duty and dissent, an inner conflict that had grown in the shadows of orders and operations. As the starship's sensors began to ping, heralding the start of another routine mission, Elise steeled herself for the day's challenges. She recalled the whispers among the ranks about changes in the regime, murmurs of discontent that threatened to upend the fragile stability of New Aurora. Yet, for now, her focus was solely on the horizon before her, both literal and metaphorical. The Aurora's Edge glided silently through the star-studded void, a sleek sentinel in a galaxy filled with promises and perils. On the command deck, the interplay of light from distant suns and the ship's own neon indicators created a dance of shadows that mirrored Elise's internal duality. With a final, steadying breath, she initiated the day's briefings, her voice calm but laced with the determination of someone who had witnessed too much to blindly follow orders. Every gesture, every command, was imbued with an unspoken vow to guard the flickering flame of hope in a universe where light was too often snuffed out by the darkness of unchecked power. As the morning progressed, the routine operations of the ship gave way to an undercurrent of tension, an anticipation that something monumental was stirring in the depths of New Aurora. Though the crew carried on with their tasks, Elise's eyes frequently wandered back to the viewport, as if seeking guidance in the endless expanse of stars. In the silence that punctuated the hum of the engines, one could almost hear the city of New Aurora whisper its own enigmatic promise, that every new dawn held the potential for both salvation and destruction, and that in the interplay of light and dark, the future of humanity would ultimately be forged. In the subdued light of the starship's private quarters, Captain Elise Voss sat alone at a work table cluttered with faded photographs and personal mementos. The hum of the Aurora's Edge had long ceased its routine mechanical song, leaving her with the sound of her own thoughts, a constant reminder of a past that refused to be forgotten. Each relic in her possession was a testament to the life she had lost, a cracked image of smiling faces, a handwritten note pressed between the pages of a worn journal, and a small, battered trinket that once belonged to her daughter. The memories came unbidden, sweeping over her like a tidal wave. Elise recalled the days before New Aurora, when life on Earth was vibrant with promise and possibility. She remembered how her family had gathered around a modest dinner table, laughter echoing in the warm glow of lamplight. But that light had been extinguished too soon. a calculated strike in a covert operation that left her world irreparably shattered. The pain was raw, a persistent undercurrent beneath her disciplined exterior. With each heartbeat, the loss grew heavier, and yet, it forged in her an unyielding determination. Outside her small sanctuary, the ship's corridors buzzed with the silent efficiency of a well-organized crew, each member performing their tasks with a quiet dedication. Yet Elise's inner world was a storm of conflicted emotions. Her mind often wandered to the face of her daughter, whose eyes had once mirrored a future filled with hope. Now, that future was marred by the cold calculus of survival and the sacrifices demanded by a regime that thrived on control. The dichotomy of her existence was painfully clear. The professional facade she maintained was but a thin veneer covering a soul deeply scarred by personal tragedy. During a break in her solitude, Elise joined a small gathering in the crew's mess hall, a rare moment when the rigid hierarchies of command melted into shared humanity. Around a table lit by the soft glow of a holographic display, she listened as her second-in-command recounted whispered stories of those who had quietly resisted the regime's iron grip. These were stories of small rebellions and quiet acts of defiance, tales that resonated with the echoes of loss and the desire for redemption. In those conversations, Elise found a fragile connection to the crew's collective hope, a spark that slowly rekindled her long-dormant belief in the possibility of change. As she engaged in measured dialogue with her trusted officers, the weight of responsibility pressed upon her shoulders. Every word exchanged was laden with unspoken acknowledgement of their shared burdens, burdens that included not only the scars of war and tyranny, but also the lingering grief of personal loss. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was also a subtle strength emerging, one born of the realization that pain, when transformed, could become the catalyst for radical courage. Later that evening, in the quiet solitude of her quarters, Elise allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. With trembling fingers, she traced the contours of a faded family portrait, silently promising that the sacrifices of her past would not be in vain. In that intimate moment, the captain's inner resolve crystallized into a steely determination. She would channel her grief into an unwavering commitment to protect those who still had a chance at a future, even if it meant challenging the very forces that had once betrayed her trust. As the ship sailed further into the dark expanse of space, the echoes of loss reverberated through Elise's thoughts, mingling with a burgeoning resolve to rewrite the narrative of her destiny. In a universe where memories could be both a burden and a beacon, she began to understand that her scars might one day guide her toward redemption, not just for herself, but for all those whose voices had been silenced by the relentless march of an indifferent regime. A faint, insistent chime broke the relative calm of the Aurora's Edge Command Center, drawing Elise's attention to a discreet panel nestled behind a console. In that dimly lit space, the usual hum of routine operations faded into a tense silence as she reached for the device. A stream of encrypted data flickered on the screen, a signal not meant for routine channels, but clandestine, urgent, and laced with hidden dangers. Her heart skipped a beat as she deciphered the coded message. The data spoke of a classified operation in the lower echelons of New Aurora's military complex, a plan to deploy a doomsday device designed to obliterate dissent with a single, catastrophic strike. The message, transmitted through shadow networks, had no signature, yet its implications were unmistakable. General Marcus Kane, the unyielding architect of their current regime, was orchestrating an act of calculated annihilation. Elise's mind raced. In a space where trust was a luxury and loyalty could be both a shield and a shackle, this revelation carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken betrayals. As she absorbed the gravity of the information, the corridor around her seemed to close in, every flickering light, every soft murmur of the crew resonating with the pulse of impending doom. Seated at her command station, Elise initiated a secure conference call with her closest advisors. The voices that answered were hushed and measured, each laden with the silent recognition of what was at stake. "This isn't just a protocol update," she stated, her tone steely yet threaded with underlying dread. "What I've intercepted confirms that General Kane is planning to trigger a device that will eliminate not just our enemies, but entire sectors of our people. We're talking about a deliberate act of overkill. A low murmur of disbelief and fear rippled through the speakers. Lieutenant Mora, her trusted tactical officer, responded, "Captain, if this is true, the regime isn't just playing a game of control. They're crossing a line that condemns us all." Another voice, soft but resolute, added, "We must act swiftly. This intelligence leaves us no room for inaction." In the ensuing silence, Elise's thoughts churned. The conflict that had always simmered beneath her disciplined exterior now burst into a tempest of ethical dilemmas. How could she, a loyal servant to the chain of command, stand against an order if it meant preserving what little humanity remained? Each second that ticked by was a grim reminder of the potential millions of lives destined to be erased by the cold logic of power. Her gaze shifted to the viewport where the cosmos stretched out like a canvas of infinite possibility and peril. The vast darkness beyond mirrored the moral void threatening to engulf her world, a void where decisions could either kindle hope or snuff out the last vestiges of life. With a trembling breath, Elise resolved that her next actions could not be dictated by orders alone. The revelation demanded not just resistance, but a profound reckoning with the very nature of sacrifice and authority. In that moment, the weight of the intercepted signal pressed down on her shoulders, reshaping her mission from routine defense to an urgent crusade against tyranny. Every keystroke and whispered command from that secure line was a step toward a rebellion born out of necessity rather than ambition, a stand against a system that deemed human life expendable. As the digital message faded from the screen, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening, Elise's determination crystallized. The covert signal had ignited a spark, a dangerous, incendiary spark that might either light the way to salvation or plunge them all into an irreversible abyss. With a final, resolute glance at the data, she knew that the time for passive obedience had ended. The path forward was fraught with peril, yet it was the only path that could prevent the impending catastrophe, a path that demanded sacrifices, alliances, and a steadfast belief that even in the darkest hours, humanity could choose hope over annihilation. In the depths of New Aurora's underbelly, where neon reflections danced on rain-soaked cobblestones and secrets whispered through abandoned corridors, Captain Elise Voss began to weave the fragile threads of rebellion. The atmosphere was thick with a tension that spoke of both imminent danger and a simmering hope, a hope that grew from the silent, defiant acts of those who refused to accept tyranny. Late that night, beneath the glow of hidden street lamps and the hum of distant hovercrafts, Elise slipped away from the starship. The secret meeting point was an old transit hub, long abandoned by the authorities but still resonant with the echoes of the city's past. As she arrived, the narrow alleyway revealed a motley assembly of individuals gathered in hushed clusters. Shadows moved in the periphery, and faces lit by the intermittent flicker of faulty neon signs betrayed lives marred by loss and rebellion. Among the assembly was Lieutenant Mora, whose steely gaze belied the scars of countless battles, and a few other trusted officers, each carrying their own burdens, each harboring dreams of a future unshackled by oppression. The air was charged with anticipation, punctuated by murmurs of discontent and cautious hope. Elise's presence silenced the murmurs for a heartbeat as she took the makeshift stage of an overturned crate. The dim light cast long, wavering shadows over her determined features, etching lines of resolve and sorrow alike. "Friends," Elise began, her voice both firm and gentle, "tonight we stand at the crossroads of our destiny. We have all suffered under the weight of Cain's iron rule, and now, with this new intelligence, we face a decision that could change the course of our lives." Her words, laced with a potent mix of urgency and empathy, resonated with the small crowd. In every eye, there flickered a spark of recognition, of the sacrifices already made and of the battles yet to come. Over the following hours, the clandestine gathering evolved into a forum of strategy and confession. Elise invited each participant to share their story, a narrative of loss, hope, and rebellion. An older mechanic, his face creased by decades of hardship, spoke quietly about the day his workshop was razed under orders that spared neither property nor people. A young engineer, trembling yet resolute, recounted the disappearance of her sibling, a casualty of the regime's unyielding measures. Each tale added layers to the collective narrative, a tapestry woven from the threads of defiance and deep-seated grief. As dialogue flowed, plans began to take shape. The group discussed clandestine methods to subvert surveillance networks and proposed coordinated strikes on strategic communication nodes. Maps were unfurled on battered tablet screens, illuminated by the soft glow of portable lanterns, and hushed debates ensued over the safest routes through the labyrinthine backstreets of New Aurora. In one corner, Elise conferred privately with Lieutenant Mora, both understanding that every decision made here could be a matter of life or death. The meeting was not merely a strategic assembly, it was an act of emotional alchemy. In sharing their sorrows, the group found common ground, a shared resolve to reclaim a semblance of freedom. Amidst the serious tactical discussions, there were moments of levity, too. A whispered joke here, a knowing smile there, small defiant gestures that reminded them of their humanity. In that hidden corner of the city, beneath a veil of secrecy, a genuine bond began to form. The bond of a community united by loss and fortified by the courage to rise again. As the night deepened, the atmosphere grew both somber and resolute. Plans were set in motion. Discreet signals would be sent to other cells of the rebellion, and secret rendezvous would be scheduled to synchronize their actions. Every word spoken, every nod exchanged, reinforced the unspoken promise that they were no longer alone in their struggle. The rebellion was no longer a scattered murmur but a growing chorus, each voice contributing to the rising tide against an oppressive regime. Before dispersing, Elise lingered at the center of the gathering, her eyes scanning the determined faces around her. In that moment, the weight of leadership pressed upon her with both its bitter burdens and its rare, uplifting triumphs. The shadows of New Aurora had gathered not merely as an act of survival, but as a spark for revolution, a spark that, if nurtured, could ignite a fire bright enough to cast aside the darkness. With that final thought, she silently vowed that every sacrifice, every whispered secret in the dark, would be a stepping stone toward reclaiming the future. The meeting ended with hushed farewells and cautious promises to reconvene. As Elise melted back into the night, the city around her pulsed with the quiet heartbeat of resistance, a silent, potent affirmation that in the gathering shadows, the seeds of revolution were firmly sown. Beneath the shimmering allure of New Aurora's neon skyline lay a labyrinthine underworld that few dared to acknowledge, a realm of forgotten infrastructure and hidden alleys where secrets thrived in the dark. Here, the city's radiant facade dissolved into a mosaic of shadow and rain, an urban canyon echoing with whispered legends and clandestine ambitions. Elise navigated this perilous network with a cautious determination. Abandoned transit tunnels and crumbling maintenance corridors served as passageways for those who dared challenge the oppressive regime. The air was heavy with the scent of damp concrete and rusted metal, punctuated by the distant hum of malfunctioning streetlights. Every step she took was a calculated risk, a quiet defiance against a system that sought to control every facet of existence. Accompanied by a small cadre of trusted resistance members, Elise moved through the underbelly with the precision of a seasoned operative. Lieutenant Mora led the way, her eyes alert to every flicker of movement, every subtle shift in the darkness. Their path was lit only by the sporadic glow of salvage technology, portable lanterns and repurposed screens that cast eerie, transient patterns on the walls, transforming the bleak corridors into a canvas of hope and despair. Along the route, remnants of the past lay scattered like relics. Old posters clinging to walls with slogans long faded, graffiti marking the silent protest of citizens who once dared to dream of freedom. Each fragment of history in this subterranean maze was a testament to the resilience of those who had lived before, a silent archive of lives erased and battles fought. It was here, amidst the ruins, that Elise found both solace and the steely resolve needed for the journey ahead. In one particularly desolate sector of the underbelly, the group encountered a hidden gathering of scavengers and outcasts, people who had managed to survive on the fringes of New Aurora's glittering splendor. Their eyes, hardened by a lifetime of struggle, met Elise's with a mix of suspicion and cautious hope. Conversations were sparse, conducted in hushed tones and coded gestures that spoke volumes about trust and survival. In a cramped, makeshift shelter assembled from discarded shipping containers, Elise exchanged vital intelligence with these underground denizens. They provided her with critical insights on the latest movements of regime informants and the safest routes through the city's most heavily patrolled sectors. Every twist and turn in the network tested the group's resolve. They evaded covert surveillance drones that patrolled the tunnels and sidestepped the roving bands of mercenaries employed by the regime. The tension was palpable, each moment a delicate balance between stealth and the omnipresent threat of discovery. In the echoing corridors of the underbelly, every footstep resonated like a heartbeat, an unspoken reminder that freedom demanded risk and the price of defiance was often paid in silence. As the group advanced deeper into the underbelly, Elise couldn't help but reflect on the stark duality of New Aurora. Above, the city dazzled with futuristic promise and meticulously crafted order. Below, its underbelly bore the scars of exploitation and neglect. This stark contrast fueled her determination. Each hidden passage and every clandestine meeting in these dark recesses reaffirmed the resolve of a people longing for justice. In this realm of shadows, plans were not merely discussed, they were etched into the fabric of the underground. Secret signals, marked by a series of subtle hand signs and improvised light patterns, allowed disparate cells of the rebellion to communicate and coordinate their movements. The underbelly had become more than just a refuge. It was the lifeblood of a burgeoning revolution, a place where every dark corner harbored a spark of defiance. As the chapter of this dangerous expedition unfolded, Elise's thoughts turned to the imminent challenges that lay ahead. The deeper they ventured, the more the underbelly revealed the true face of New Aurora, a complex tapestry woven from despair, resistance, and an unwavering yearning for liberation. Each narrow escape and every shared moment of trust in the darkness reinforced her belief that even in the midst of ruin, the human spirit could ignite a flame powerful enough to light the way to a new dawn. The journey through New Aurora's underbelly was a crucible for Elise and her band of rebels, a harrowing yet necessary pilgrimage toward the heart of tyranny. And as they emerged from the depths into the dim prelude of dawn, their resolve had only grown fiercer, each step forward a defiant march toward reclaiming the future they so desperately believed in. The darkness of space cloaked the starship Aurora's Edge as it loomed near a heavily fortified installation, the nerve center of General Kane's dominion. With the silent precision of a predator, Elise Voss and her carefully assembled team set their plan in motion. The breach was not merely a physical intrusion. It was a deliberate defiance against an oppressive regime, a calculated risk that could very well decide the fate of thousands. Inside the cramped, tension-laden corridor of a commandeered service module, Elise's pulse pounded in time with the rhythmic beeping of sensors and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of cloaking devices. Every movement was orchestrated with meticulous care. Lieutenant Mora, her eyes fixed on the shifting patterns of digital surveillance feeds, guided the team through a labyrinth of security protocols and laser grids. The plan was clear: penetrate deep into the installation, locate the control hub of the Doomsday device, and disrupt the trigger mechanism before it could be activated. As they navigated the narrow, dimly lit passageways, every creak of metal and whisper of air sent jolts of adrenaline through Elise's veins. The walls were adorned with the stark, unyielding symbols of military might, a constant reminder of the regime's iron grip. Yet, amidst the looming danger, the team's solidarity shone through. Each member moved with a shared understanding that failure was not an option. Reaching a critical junction, the team paused at a reinforced bulkhead. Elise's hand hovered over the control panel, her eyes narrowing as she swiftly bypassed the encryption with an array of improvised commands. In that suspended moment, time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat a silent countdown to either salvation or disaster. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber bathed in the harsh glare of emergency lights and the incessant hum of industrial machinery. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with the scent of heated metal and fear. Rows of intimidating consoles lined the walls, and a central pedestal, dominated by a pulsating core of energy, stood as the linchpin of Kane's catastrophic weapon. Elise led her team into the chamber, every step measured and deliberate. The The quiet was suddenly shattered by the distant sound of footsteps, an ominous reminder that time was running out and that the installation's guardians might be converging upon them. A hushed urgency filled the space as the team divided to secure positions. Elise approached the central console, her gloved hands dancing over the controls with an expert's familiarity born of countless missions in the void of space. Each keystroke was a silent prayer against the impending chaos, a hope that she could dismantle the weapon before it unleashed irreversible devastation. Around her, the tension was palpable. The soft murmur of communications over secure channels mingled with the metallic echo of their covert advance. Suddenly, alarms began to wail, a stark, discordant symphony that reverberated off cold steel and heightened every sense. The team tensed. The breach had been discovered. In rapid, coordinated motions, they adapted their strategy. Lieutenant Mora directed a squad to block the incoming patrols, their movements precise and synchronized like a well-rehearsed ballet of defiance. Meanwhile, Elise focused on the console, her mind racing against the ticking clock. Each passing second magnified the stakes, for with every moment, the doomsday device edged closer to activation. The confrontation escalated quickly. A squad of armed guards burst into the chamber, their weapons raised and eyes hardened with resolve. In that charged moment, dialogue was replaced by the language of combat, furtive signals, quick nods, and determined stares. Elise's voice, calm but unyielding, cut through the chaos as she ordered her team to hold the line. The room became a crucible of raw emotion and clashing ideals, each side driven by its own unyielding beliefs. Amid the cacophony, Elise's fingers continued their relentless work on the console, her eyes locked onto the fluctuating readouts that indicated her progress. With a final, decisive command, she initiated a sequence designed to dismantle the trigger mechanism. In that heart-stopping moment, as the energy core pulsed in a frenetic cadence, the battle around her slowed to an agonizing crawl. Every second was a blend of tension and relief, a precarious dance on the edge of annihilation. As the system began to shut down, a heavy silence fell over the chamber, a silence that was as much a victory as it was a prelude to further conflict. The guards, momentarily disoriented by the sudden loss of their weapons' power, hesitated, allowing Elise's team to regroup and secure the area. Yet, even as the immediate threat waned, the repercussions of the breach rippled outward. The disruption of the doomsday device was not merely a technical triumph. It was a symbolic act of rebellion against a regime that had long underestimated the resilience of those it sought to control. In the aftermath, amidst the scattered echoes of clashing metal and fading alarms, Elise took a moment to absorb the magnitude of what they had achieved. The breach was a turning point, a demonstration that even the most formidable barriers could be overcome by the courage of a united few. As the team prepared to extract themselves from the now destabilized installation, Elise's eyes shone with a quiet determination. The journey ahead would be fraught with even greater challenges, but the spark of resistance had been ignited, and the fight for humanity's soul had reached a critical, irrevocable stage. The cold metallic corridor of the regime's inner sanctum transformed into an arena where destiny and ideology collided. As Elise stepped into the vast command hall, a room dominated by a panoramic holographic display of New Aurora, the air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. Here, in the heart of enemy territory, the battle was not just for control over a doomsday device, but for the soul of a civilization. At the center of the hall stood General Marcus Kane, his presence as imposing as the monolithic statues that lined the walls. His uniform, adorned with stark medals and insignia, mirrored a man who believed in the absolute necessity of sacrifice. His eyes, cold and calculating, bore into Elise as though they could unearth every doubt hidden within her steely facade. "You've come a long way, Captain Voss," Kane intoned, his voice echoing across the silent expanse. "But the path you choose leads only to chaos. Order must be maintained, even if it requires the hard hand of overkill." His tone was clinical, laced with a conviction that bordered on fanaticism. Elise's gaze never wavered. "Order at what cost, General?" she replied, her voice resonating with a mix of grief and resolute defiance. "Every life lost in the name of stability is a price too high for humanity to pay." You speak of sacrifice as if it were a currency to be spent without reckoning. But each act of destruction leaves behind scars that no regime can ever erase. The hall seemed to shrink as their words clashed like titanic forces. Behind them, the holographic display flickered to life, its images shifting between scenes of thriving cityscapes and devastated sectors, a silent chronicle of Kane's uncompromising rule and Elise's unyielding resistance. The visual narrative underscored their debate, a record of decisions that had already cost too much. Kane stepped forward, his gaze hardening. You dare judge me when you have not borne the burden of command. In this universe, weakness is the precursor to oblivion. I have done what must be done to ensure survival, even if it means extinguishing a few sparks to preserve the greater flame. His words, measured and stark, sought to justify a doctrine of ruthlessness, a philosophy that prioritized collective security over individual suffering. Elise's eyes flashed with both sorrow and conviction. Survival is not merely about erasing dissent, General, she countered, her tone rising with fervor. It's about cherishing every spark of hope, even if it flickers precariously in the darkness. True strength lies in protecting those sparks, in allowing humanity the grace to err, to heal, and to rebuild. The intensity in her voice was palpable, as if each syllable carried the weight of every lost soul. For a long moment, the two stood locked in their ideological duel, the silence punctuated only by the hum of distant machinery and the soft, relentless ticking of an unseen clock. Around them, loyal officers and resistance members alike held their breath, aware that this confrontation was more than personal. It was a reckoning for a divided future. Kane's face contorted with a mix of disdain and pity. Your idealism blinds you, Captain. In my world, mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. Sometimes, to save what remains, one must make choices that others would call monstrous. His voice, though unyielding, betrayed an undercurrent of isolation, a man convinced that his hard choices were the only path to preserving order in a universe that threatened to spiral into chaos. Elise took a measured step closer, her eyes never leaving his. And what if your monstrous choices strip us of our humanity? What becomes of us when we are defined by the blood we spill rather than the hope we nurture? I refuse to accept a future where our legacy is one of fear and regret. Her words, imbued with raw passion, were both a plea and a battle cry, a call to reclaim the soul of a people teetering on the edge of despair. The confrontation reached a fever pitch as both leaders, representing divergent paths forged by their own painful histories, grappled with the weight of their convictions. The room pulsed with the gravity of their debate, as if the very walls absorbed the collision of ideals, a testament to the fact that in the struggle for a better future, every choice was laced with sacrifice. In the midst of the charged standoff, a subtle shift occurred. The calculated rigidity in Kane's posture wavered, replaced by a fleeting glimpse of uncertainty. For a brief heartbeat, the general's eyes softened, a silent acknowledgement of the cost his vision demanded. Yet, as quickly as it came, the moment passed, replaced once more by the unwavering resolve of a man committed to his doctrine. Elise, sensing the fragility of that flicker, pressed on with quiet determination. General Kane, the true measure of our strength is not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to preserve what makes us human. Let this moment be a turning point, a chance to choose a future where even in the darkest hours, our light is not extinguished by fear. Their words, heavy with the burdens of command and the hope of redemption, hung suspended in the charged air. The clash of ideals was far from resolved, yet in that moment, the seeds of change had been sown. The collision between Elise's vision of compassionate resistance and Kane's uncompromising order would reverberate far beyond this hall, setting the stage for the future of New Aurora. As the confrontation drew to a close, neither leader could claim victory. Only a deep, resonant understanding that their divergent paths were destined to shape the fate of humanity. The ideological duel was complete, leaving in its wake a charged silence that foretold both the promise and peril of the battles yet to come. In the waning light of a shattered regime, New Aurora lay cloaked in the somber hues of dusk. The city's neon splendor now intermingled with shadows of ruin and uncertain hope. The fallout from the breach had sent ripples through every level of society, leaving behind a canvas marred by loss, redemption, and the promise of a new beginning. Amidst this quiet devastation, Captain Elise Voss stood atop a derelict overpass, surveying the cityscape that was both her battleground and her home. The confrontation with General Kane had reverberated far beyond the inner sanctum. In the immediate aftermath, communication networks flickered with conflicting reports, glimpses of a regime in disarray, of scattered loyalists regrouping, and of resistance cells daring to claim their independence. Streets that once echoed with the staccato march of authoritarian order now pulsed with the spontaneous murmur of hope. In this delicate balance between order and chaos, Elise felt the weight of every decision made in the crucible of rebellion. As dusk deepened into night, Elise moved through the city with a purposeful determination, her footsteps echoing in empty corridors and deserted plazas. Every broken billboard and abandoned kiosk told a story of lives upended and dreams deferred by the ruthless hand of oppression. Yet, in the midst of this ruin, the embers of resilience glowed stubbornly, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. In hushed conversations over makeshift radios, citizens whispered of rebuilding, of salvaging beauty from the wreckage, and of forging a future where sacrifice was not measured by bloodshed alone. In a makeshift command center set up within an old community center, Elise and her closest allies gathered to assess the new reality. The mood was subdued but resolute. Each face bore the traces of recent battles, bruises, scars, and eyes that had witnessed too much. Here, plans were laid not just for survival, but for a reimagined society. Maps were spread across tables, each marking critical sites of resistance, strategic resources, and safe havens. There was no grand victory, only the somber acknowledgement that the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and every step forward demanded courage. During a quiet moment amidst the planning, Elise found herself alone on a battered balcony, overlooking a cityscape where the remnants of towering spires and flickering neon signs formed a surreal mosaic of both decay and possibility. The cool night air carried with it echoes of distant celebrations and murmurs of defiance. In the reflective solitude, she allowed herself to remember not only the grief of her losses, but also the moments of tender humanity shared along the way. The smiles of strangers united in struggle, the selfless acts of kindness in a time of despair, and the fierce, unyielding hope that had kept them all moving forward. Her thoughts turned to General Kane, a man who, despite his unyielding methods, had been a product of a world steeped in violence and fear. In the quiet of the night, Elise grappled with the complexity of forgiveness and the possibility of transformation. Could a future be carved from the ashes of such entrenched ideologies? Her resolve was unshaken, even as doubts crept in. The battle was not merely against an external enemy, but against the very legacy of division and sacrifice that had defined their past. As dawn crept over the horizon, the first rays of a tentative new day illuminated a city poised between the past and the promise of renewal. The rebel cells, once fragmented and fearful, began to coalesce into a network dedicated not only to resistance, but to reconstruction. Conversations turned to rebuilding infrastructure, restoring trust, and redefining what it meant to live free from the tyranny of unchecked power. Elise, with her heart still heavy from loss yet buoyed by the unyielding spirit of those around her, took up the mantle of leadership with renewed purpose. She knew that every choice made in the coming days would etch the future of New Aurora into either perpetual darkness or a horizon ablaze with hope. In that fragile moment, as the city stirred from its slumber and the embers of defiance caught anew, Elise vowed that the sacrifices of the past would serve as the foundation for a future built on unity, compassion, and the enduring strength of humanity. The scars of yesterday would, in time, transform into the very symbols of their rebirth, a reminder that even amid the ashes, embers of hope could kindle a flame capable of lighting the way to a brighter tomorrow. The journey had reached its conclusion, yet the road ahead remained unwritten, a delicate balance of rebuilding, reconciliation, and the relentless pursuit of a justice that honored every lost life, and celebrated every spark of resilience.